All right, Dasha. Yeah, keep it like that. A cat under me, and Arestovych will be in a bigger picture. Chad is commenting that Alexey got a new shirt. He probably will change it again. Too late, guys. That was a few streams ago. All right, let's go live. Good evening. This is Yulia Latynina. As usual, on Wednesdays, we have a guest, Alexey Arestovych, with us. Good evening, Alexey. Good evening, Yulia. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Our channel, similar as Nevzorov's and Fagin's channel, is being attacked by a bunch of Putin's trolls, so we appreciate your help in supporting us. That matters. So, although the main question is, as always, what is happening on the front, I do have to start with a question that is somewhat to the side of that one. Let's start with Putin, who was standing and waiting for Erdogan in Tehran, where, if you remember, Roosevelt and Stalin were dividing the world back in the times of Second World War. And these days, these two guys are meeting. What's going on there? It's a more demented situation there happening because Putin said we started the war because of NATO. I ran somebody saying that if Russia would not have started the war, NATO countries would have started that. And then Erdogan joins them, who actually represents NATO because Turkey is a NATO country. But nobody is seem to be concerned with these incongruities because Russia is the country of postmodern fascism, and before, I guess it seems to them that the more disconnects they have, the stronger Putin's regime is. Don't ask me why. And it actually is Middle East. In the countries of that region, it is not just the posture that is being analyzed, but also every minute detail of the meeting. This is a whole other level of political nuance. As one can say that a woman marrying her man gets an extra channel from God that lets her know more things about what's going on with her man. It kind of matters in every minute detail here. The turn, the degree of a head tilt, the way the handshake was. Every detail is absolutized to a very infinitesimal detail. So what Erdogan does, he makes Putin wait. These are screaming seconds. I'm sorry for interjecting here, but I think if Putin have taken Kiev in 3 days, Erdogan would not be making him wait. Maybe, but he failed to do so. And all those who analyzed the meeting did notice it. And if we are discussing it here with our views and kind of Western attitude, imagine what people in the Middle East are thinking. And one can stipulate that people can deduce that Putin is not so important or so valuable or so influential. One can say, looking at Russia from that part of the world, that Putin wants to be similar to Erdogan, and he is failing. I also recently got a polling research from Moscow. They did an internal poll, and they once in a while do that just to kind of gauge the temperature. So, in analyzing this war, Kremlin actually, it's not our diagnosis, it's Kremlin diagnosis that it's narcissistic support. It is built on the belief and the faith in Russian military, in overwhelming superiority of Russian military, and it was also built on the feeling of belonging to the picture of being Russian. So Putin fulfilled social contract in trying to rehabilitate what many people in Russia felt at the end of 90s, which many people considered to be a very difficult moment of depression and low esteem. The only white spot on that was probably Russia's raid of airborne troops into Pristina. So a bunch of Russians started calling themselves proudly Russians again with Putin's reign. A whole different concept of Russian at that moment. They supported their patriotic fervor with successful wars in Georgia and the like, and of course high oil prices. And he came to this war on a peak of his career and a peak of people who were believing in him. About 30.8% support the war without any comments. About 18 more percent support war with partially, not fully. So I don't have that number right here, but it's basically about 30% that support them completely. So altogether, it actually sums to a smaller number than Alexey Arestovych had in his polling, who said 55%. So this one is a bit smaller than that. He probably saw the similar research because one way or another it's 30% absolutely supporting it, and then there are two other groups kind of sorta with some commentary. And this was the polling by Kremlin for Kremlin. So it's interesting when different research comes to the same numbers. Roughly, that's the numbers they have right now. And this war had to be the peak of Putin's reign. So, all these three tendencies should have acquired new force and then turn into some new quality of re-establishing a bigger Russia or a Soviet Union in a way. They likely would have interpreted it this way, and I guess in their postmodern concept it would be whatever victory we get out of it is good. But instead, this war turns into the lowest point, and his position falls down from the skies. He was afraid in the Middle East. He was afraid down south. Even in the West, French and German, when meeting with him, they were very careful. They worked carefully with Russia. And he managed to convince the whole world in his strength. With propaganda, with his money, with his actions in Syria, that he has got the second army. Some of the Western intellectuals were pretty weak and they rushed wholeheartedly to support Putin and his government style. And all of a sudden everything just falls down. The floor drops from under their feet. I personally think that at the beginning of this operation there were at least 80% supporting it. And right now it's way less, while economic decline has not even said hello. It's only barely just creeping in. They, at the same time, already have reporting on the regions of Russia on their top level, which means there is a concern. And also they are forming national battalions or regional battalions, which has a lateral goal of taking out those activists and throwing them in the war with the hope that they will be demoralized, disabled, and will not protest inside. And also Ramazan Kadyrov in Chechnya, who requested air defense systems from Kremlin. Do you have any comments? Why do you think he might need that air defense system? I think he needs it to defend himself from Russia, not from Ukraine. Yeah, it was a sarcastic question. Third Chechen war is looming on the horizon. Most analysts are saying that it is inevitable at some point. So this had three components. Let's complete that. Economic, national, and the belief in the Russian military. None of these three is really doing well now. I need to interject here. Do you think most people do not fall prey to Russian propaganda when they're showing pictures of Russian army destroying HIMARS vehicles, and do you think it has no effect on them? Well, those who support, they of course believe. Those wholehearted 30%, with some issues, another 25. But first of all, this is lower than initial 80. And even them, well, let's see, everything is determined by the passionate kernel, the passionate core of every group. And Russian opposition and Russian media are tracking different forums of those who support Putin. Right now they're screaming. They're screaming about losses, about withdrawals from Snake Island, from under Kiev, about losing the capability to cross by Antonov Bridge, that it was not protected. That does not add any good mood to those who support Putin. And that's the main target of the army. Its goals is to solve political tasks set in front of it by the political regime. Army is only there to fulfill the tasks, and it cannot. Now imagine what might happen if we start counteroffensive and we capture thousands of Russians, because any offensive gets captured troops. It's just normal. So when we'll start advancing, there'll be a ton of prisoners of war. By the way, why are you not advancing yet? We're waiting. Our task right now is to wear them out. Wear them down so they lose their capability to advance. In the moment they lose the capability to advance, they lose capability to counter-attack or attack us in return to our, in response to our offensive. So there'll be several short questions. You almost answered most of them, but I still want to do a little blitz here. As far as I understand, one of my other speakers, Roman Svitan, told me that Severodonetsk is basically empty, and that Donetsk is empty, and Ukraine could capture the heights next to the city. Why you're not doing it? We will do it on time, Yulia. As always, there is a question. To do what? Imagine we captured those heights near Donetsk. What for? Well, first of all, it'll produce a shaking impression even on pro-Putin's public. Do you understand? It's real difficult to explain people what those Trudovskaya heights are around Donetsk. Even on tactical measures, they don't produce too much of an impression. It is a local kind of news. Understandable mostly for the locals. People understand bigger gestures like sunken cruise ship, sunken flagman, destruction of a bridge. These actions, they do cause a bigger impression in the society. So I would say these captures of the heights and all, they will eventually be our goal, but it'll take some time before we get there. Do you think one can link Trudovskaya heights to actual capture of Donetsk? Not really. Terracon, Crocodile, Two Tits, and I forgot the name of another one. Those are the names of the mountains. The fact that Ukrainians captured them will probably not produce too much of an impression, or at least their propaganda will try to smooth it down. So another question. You did hit Antonov Bridge. Why were you waiting for so long? Because everything that crossed that bridge later shot Nikolaev up. And about a month ago, you and me discussed here that Ukrainian army set new positions for artillery that make Antonov Bridge accessible for their strikes. Everything is done in its own time. Russian army did not lose its ability to shoot up Nikolaev because we got a hold of that bridge. How did not they lose? Where from do they take all the shells? Well, they have some. They have some resources and reserves, but they can still send a vehicle or two with more shells. And they might even use a pontoon bridge to do that. But in any case, it means that resupply of the group is very complicated. So they'll try doing it with vehicles, and a bit later it'll become really sad for those Russian soldiers on the front who will be very upset in their fortified lines. And all these lines at some point will become a wish to surrender as fast as they can. So it just becomes pretty sad down south for Russian troops. They're not really welcome. Do you realize what modern warfare is? Not a single army in the world has means to turn everything 180 degrees. That's why our situation is not resolved in one-time significant actions, but by accumulating forces in a certain part of the front, controlling the situation there, and then being able to use that force. Because when American army fought with, let's say, Iraq army, American 5+ level, Iraq 3-, and Iraq army was also without the leader by that time, Americans did walk for 22 days to Baghdad across desert and had their own share of grief on the way. Or you can compare that with a mass helicopter attack that Americans could impose on them. Destroy military convoys, destroy hard vehicles and equipment. And in the war in Ukraine, we started with Russia being 3+ and Ukrainian army being 3-, but now the situation is flipping. Did they take Severodonetsk, for example, the Russian troops? Yeah, they did. But it took them 90 days to take that town. And 27 brigades from, not brigades, battalion tactical groups were removed from Ukraine to Russia as a result of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk operation. 27. So since we're talking about Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, they continue their attempts to advance near Seversk and Bakhmut. And since we sung last week the ode to HIMARS and explained how they destroy Russian supplies and basically disrupt their strategy, their usual offensive strategy. So we'll not be repeating that, but perhaps you can elaborate more about their chances for success with the offensive near Seversk and Bakhmut. And second, what changed with the logistics for their shells and supplies to the Russian artillery. And the third is what actually happened with Russian artillery. Let's start with the third. It probably will be more logical this way. On the peak of fighting for Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, Russian army used from 45 to 60,000 shells a day on this front. Now they're using 15,000 tops. Average was 45, 60 was really at the peak, so 45 to 15. That's the result of HIMARS work on the artillery warehouses. Second, because of that, the advancement can't really continue. They're losing a lot of people because artillery cannot do the work for them. They need to throw people at us. To give you a picture is basically in the last 4 days we had 4 successful counterattacks by our troops. So our troops essentially came and took back the villages that they captured before that. So this tells you about the quality of their detachments and the quality of supplies they have at this point, and the morale. As for new resupply lines, they have to move them out pretty far out from the front to the borderline area that HIMARS cannot hit them. So they're trying to bring them in single vehicle or in lengthy columns, but in any way, the resupply line is failing to provide that quantity of shells that they had before. So one thing is when during the fights for Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, starting the 4th of April, they've been shelling us for 15 hours a day. Can you imagine being under artillery fire for 15 hours? I think every Ukrainian soldier who survived that needs to get all the medals we can give them. This is true bravery to stand your ground under such a hurricane fire. Can I ask you one more thing? Roman Svitan mentioned that near Bakhmut, there were several hits registered by long-range missiles like Ha-105 and that kind, that they used from Caspian Sea to attack Bakhmut. So that isn't that an indicator, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're running out of ammo? That they're using really expensive missiles to hit basic targets. And Roman is correct. He likes noticing interesting details, and they're essentially using strategic weapons on the tactical targets, which is a sign of a very deep issue. Also, the same thing from S-300 or S-400 attacking Nikolaev with these missiles that are designed to intercept air targets. That's not even burning dollars in your stove. It's kind of burning titanium and platinum to heat your room. So they're ready to pay any price to achieve certain goals. And any war where they throw strategic resources to achieve tactical goals is lacking perspective. You can perhaps achieve some short-term steps and milestones, but you cannot fight your war this way. So for me, that's an indicator that they are trying to achieve a certain political milestone with these weapons, and after that they want to probably de-escalate and try to hold the territory. Austin surprised me today that the war, with the phrase that the war is going into the final phase, which I can take as the active war from the Russian side is going to the quiet phase. So not tomorrow, not the day after, but give it a month and a half, and the Russian side will run out of steam. So probably not July, but middle of August, end of August, they will run out of resources to continue anything active. All right, 2 more things I discussed with Roman, so I wanted to address it with you to see if what do you think about it? So since they're extending their logistical chains, the Russian army is trying to use different vehicles to supply shells. Some of these vehicles are looking like grain transports. And soon we might hear that Ukraine is hitting Russian grain transports. Grain transports that they also use for stolen grain from Ukraine? Yeah. So logistics was always connected to Intel. They used to have a lot of issues with automobile logistics. 16, 90, 120 formula we talked about is important. That's the one that defines what kind of warfare you are capable of doing. So, in essence, if the warehouse, if the ammo dump is about 60 miles from the front, Russian division is spending about 155 tons of artillery shells per day. So it means that the car needs to travel each car needs to make 3 trips during 24 hours time span. And that's how they sustain their tempo of offensive. 90 kilometers, that's 2 trips. With such a supply, you can perhaps sustain offensive only by accumulating resources somewhere closer to the front and then distributing them according to the needs. And 120 miles, that's only to maintain the line. You cannot do any offensive Russian style with such a capillary supply of ammo. This is 1 trip for a driver per day, and yeah, that's becoming impossible. So HIMARS did the most important thing. They pushed the base of Russian resupplies to a distance between first and second steps, between 60 and 90 kilometers, which means that they're not stopping their offensive, but they have to slow down and they need to accumulate shells somewhere closer to the front, which is also automatically a goal for our intel to find these dumps and take them out with HIMARS. So even that becomes a big problem. And this is my next important question. Again, from my discussion with Roman Svitan, there is a lot of talk about HIMARS that very well deserve all that attention. But Roman also mentions that you've actually hit or took out Russian artillery. You basically took out their guns. So when the anti-artillery engagement started, when you got additional NATO tools to target Russian artillery, they're very effective in actually doing damage. So can you elaborate more on the tools you have for anti-artillery fight? All right, Julia. It's not too beautiful and it's less noticeable, right? So D20 and D30 is not even considered to be artillery. Hyacinth, MSTA is considered to be artillery. Everything closer to 150 millimeters is considered to be artillery. But D20 and D30 is still an important element. And we need to understand that the West is giving us not just standalone D20 or D30, but the whole complex. So we are getting not just a single howitzer, but a full complex with an intel component. And one of the main targets of such fight is also having eyes in the sky to be able to detect the location of Russian artillery. And very often our system would have not 1, but 2 or more. So in our portfolio, Caesars are probably still the best option. They're kings of anti-artillery fight. They're wheel-based, so they move real fast, unlike the Trax vehicles. And we had 12, now we got another 6, so we boosted by another half. But even 12 were doing a pretty good job. And we've always been outplaying Russian artillery, but in some parts of the front, we actually make them shut up and start maneuvering. And as you understand, when they're maneuvering, they're not shooting back. Not everything is smooth because they have about 1,300 artillery units of 152 caliber. 60% are in the center there around Bakhmut and Severodonetsk and that area. So they're aggregated there, they give us and us grief, and we have similar artillery on our side, but now we're also starting to get the better Western models. We got Polish crabs and several other articles, so we're slowly filling up the demand, and it's not so effective and huge as the Russian numbers, but it definitely fulfills the needs. And some of the Ukraine contacts I talked with, they described that they do get hit by hurricanes, by Smerch, by Russian 150 caliber artillery, which are shooting from afar. But D-30, D-20, they almost never hear them again. Well, exactly. The moment D-30, D-20 open fire, they get destroyed real fast. Those other systems, they're shooting from further distance. And right now, Russian army is at the plateau, and things are slowly changing. We are climbing up, and they'll be falling down. And sorry, I wanted to add here that I have concerns about the battle worthiness of Russian army in defense, especially after the first several defeats, because offensive by itself gives you enough motivation. But when you're defending things and defending them without a reason, then it raises a lot of questions. What are you doing here in a foreign country? What about the toilet or the dishwasher? Oh yeah, those are good things, but when HIMARS lands on your head, there'll be no toilet, dishwasher, or you. Then, a new vehicle for your parents. You've seen the advertising in Russia, right? That parents may get a new car if their son dies in the war in Ukraine. I saw that. I would not comment on this. I'll let my fellow countrymen, propagandists jump on this on the bones. I don't like emphasizing these atrocities. But the thing is, it's not parents who are fighting, it's soldiers who are fighting. Have you heard the intercept on Kharkiv area? The conversation between a parent and the soldier? The soldier says, we're losing, and the parents are saying, no, you're losing just there, everywhere else you're advancing. He is retorting back, saying, no, they're lying to you, we're losing everywhere. And it's a voice of a very tired soldier. When a soldier is himself, it is when he is tired. Because the case is that the condition of war provokes everything altogether in a human. It provokes all the good and all the bad. And the thing is, most soldiers, they are not bodhisattvas. They are not advanced human beings who can detach from all the negativity. They're a mix of everything. And you can even trace it all the way up to generals. They also fight these weird wars even between each other. So people experience waves and collective and individual mixes of euphoria, horror, despair, and it all goes in waves and changes. And hormonal and nervous systems very often teeter on the verge of breakdown. So a soldier, when he is tired of all these emotions, he just goes to the commander and says, I don't need all the motivation, just give me a task, I'll go and do it. And that's the voice of that soldier who was talking to his parents. That was his voice. He's not panicking. He knows his tasks. He knows his capabilities. He's not even having any emotions in this conversation. He understands what the rest of his troops see. That is what Russian propagandists actually see in their messaging boards, but they're trying to filter it out for the TV. Russian army is on a plateau now, and that plateau gradually shifts not in their favor. It will not be those famous 2-3 weeks, but they are sliding down. It is the beginning of their end. And this is Yulia Latynina and Alexey Arestovych. We have about 30,000 people watching us live. The more views subscribe during the stream, the better promotion it gets, and less chances those trolls will get who are leaving all kind of weird stuff in our live chat. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Alexey's channel, to Yulia's channel, and if you have not subscribed yet, to the Privateer Station, bringing that to you in English. Alright, so since Russian army is somewhat plateauing, let's look at the negotiations about the grain in Turkey. I saw that many Ukrainian military do not, or basically dread these negotiations. Those Ukrainian military tired of them are saying that they're upset and angry. Why are we even talking to Putin after Bucha? And how can one negotiate with that butcher? We only need to win him at the battlefield. Why? That's why Churchill said that war is too serious to entrust it to only military. Military has a tunnel vision. And government has a wider perspective, including economy and global politics, social aspects, culture, etc. Ukraine cannot become the reason to blame for several hundred million people to fall into hunger in Middle East and Africa. Can I also add that, Alexey, that in a couple hours I'll be talking to Fagin about hunger, and I'll be telling a story about why all these talks about world hunger is complete fake. I would not say it is a complete fake. Perhaps on a technical level it may be, but on the level of prognosis it exists. This is the trump card Putin is using when he wants to diversify his economic politics and acquire additional economic support for keeping the capability to supply food to Northern Africa. And add energy crisis and refugee crisis and Europeans, Middle East, and North Africa, they too tend to take it pretty seriously. So, imagine all these negotiations and listening on the level of United Nations, and then Ukraine strikes a pose and says, no, we're not negotiating with anyone. We're not giving grain to anybody. Just tell us which country will be suffering the most from lack of food, and we'll just light the lights in our cities with the colors of that country, just like they usually do to support us. So this doesn't really have a right level of support. Alexey, did you press something? You disappeared. I can't hear you. Alexey, I cannot physically hear you, and I think you might have pressed a button or something before that happened. Or not, maybe. So, while Alexey is figuring out the communication issues, I remind you this is Yulia Latynina and Alexey Arestovych. We have 33,000 people watching us live. and we're discussing the most sensitive issue. What are these grain matters going about? And United Nations Antonio Guterres said that these negotiations are stupidity and nothing will be signed of any meaning for them. I think actually we lost Alexey altogether. He would probably have to call us back again and dial himself back in. It appears that his microphone and his internet disconnected. So then, if we can, let's try to remedy that. And I see that Alexey is frozen on the screen. And I'll have to stand here for both of us. I understand I'm not as valuable as he is, but my personal opinion is that these negotiations will lead to nothing. If not, I'll have to eat my hat or my tie or whatever. And Ukrainians are trying to fulfill the expectation of the world that they're not an evil country, that they would love to support others. And they also need to support Erdogan, who decided to become one of the parties in these negotiations. And he represents also the country that is giving the unmanned aerial vehicles. Alexey, are you here? Yes, I am. Can you hear me now? Yes, I am here. Do you hear me? All right. I just need to mention then that you have to respect Erdogan, who did not let Russian ships through his waters. Otherwise, Snake Island and Moscow cruiser would probably look still a bit different. And of course, why not to go into negotiations, which do not necessarily mean there'll be any peace talk at all. And I need to answer that in a way that concludes that there is nothing to be afraid of for our military. There will be no peace talk with Putin at all. This is a brilliant answer. We take that. And basically, Putin is trying to negotiate on something around Kherson as well. In the meantime, they're trying to transport as much concrete, and it looks like they're getting ready for defense there. So we do see that the opponent is switching to defense. We are also taking out their capability to defend the whole Kherson region. We can see systemic work on the ammo dumps, warehouses, logistics, forward command posts, and that all indicates the same thing, that we're preparing this steak to be consumed. So nobody's going to negotiate peace talks with these guys at the moment. That will be insanity. Next question. Why was Venediktov fired? Yulia, you're putting me in an uncomfortable position to comment the cadre decisions of the president. All right, I cannot not ask this question. You understand that? I understand. So I can just reiterate the official position that President did not appreciate the depth of effort in the power ministries, how effective they were cleaning up Russian influence in their ranks. Since 2005, I can say there was an active Russian operation going on to infiltrate everything in Ukraine: military, special services, diplomacy, economy, everything. And the level of this infiltration was crazy high. I can just give an example that there were two serious top-level ministry bureaucrats who had top-level access to secret information. They recently were arrested. So Russians were trying to destroy every system that we had, and it did give some results by the beginning of 2014. And we also started actively pushing back at about 2014. So we got some good cadres from those years who showed themselves that they have Ukraine in their hearts and minds, and we're continuing the work of replacing the agents with loyal people. So are these indeed Russian spies, or does it mean that Ukrainian special forces were always, like Russian forces growing out of the same, two legs growing out of the same butt of USSR? No, until 2005, we were pretty strong. We actually had our own special services who stopped Crimea intrusions or attempts to sneak it away even before 2005. Even in the 90s, 2 years after USSR fell apart, we still managed to push back and keep it. But 7 to 10 years later, we were already corrupted. And it was pathetic to see how Russia was overtaking things. So now we do have a whole new wave of soldiers and officers who showed themselves, who demonstrated that they are not supporting Russia, that they have Ukraine interests in mind, and we are promoting these officers and taking our force ministers back. And these are difficult decisions that he has to make. So he was not making decisions lightly, and in one day it took a lot of data, a lot of analyzing to make these decisions. So I do hope in the near future we'll hear some good things about promotions in these ministries. You said something very interesting here, that Putin started his infiltration since 2005. Basically, that would be 2005 when he started preparing for war. He was starting to prepare to annex Ukraine in one way or another since 2005. And I did visit Russia back then, and I did communicate a lot with some of his philosophical advisors, like Dugin and the like, and they did not even hide their intention. So their intent was to overtake Ukraine and put them under control of Russia. So the results were actually visible. We met Maidan of 2013 when our president fled to Russia, when Crimea was overtaken, and we have the head of Ministry of Police, a Russian citizen, a Ministry of Special Services and Security is a Russian citizen, a Ministry of Defense, a Russian citizen. There has never been a situation, a precedent before, when you attacking a different country would have all of the power ministers as your own citizens. I cannot even remember any single example like that anywhere before. I think I can give you some similarity. When Saakashvili came after the Revolution of Roses to Putin to the first meeting with him, and he wanted to be friends with him because he understood that Georgia will not be in a good position if they'll oppose Russia. And he even prayed in the church before going to see Putin. So Putin came and talked to... so Saakashvili came and talked to Putin, and Putin asked him only one thing: do not fire Khaburdzania, the Minister of Internal Affairs. And he comes back to Georgia, and he still needs to fire that guy. So he had to fire him, and he did fire him. And that's when the awful hatred of Putin to Saakashvili started. Was Khaburdzania a citizen of Russia? I think he was a Russian agent. And okay, I'll take that. But these people were not just agents, they were also citizens. This is double loyalty. And now all these guys, all these ex-power ministers, they're in Russia since 2014. That was a catastrophe. That was a catastrophe of Ukrainian government, complete and total, and that was a result of planned and prepared actions of Russian Federation. That part of their operation back then was done brilliantly. That level of strategy and tactical effort, one can only stand up and applaud to their success back in the day. Do you have other examples? Sure. The sale of the biggest military group in Europe. Creation of social conditions in a country where the profession of a military is one of the most despised. You're saying that it was not Ukraine, it was Putin. That was by design. They basically exploited our weaknesses. They created certain conditions. We're their main competitors in weapons trade with Russia. And they were creating fake contracts and conditions that we were glad to capture. And we were thinking that we took over Russian initiative and will get new markets. But those were just the traps set by Putin regime in Africa, forcing us to sell some of the really key elements of our defense, like anti-air defense, for nothing, for very low bidding. Another example for you, the destruction of our warehouses with ammo, the ones that we really needed them, missiles for Smerch, Hurricane, and Buk, artillery shells, during the whole time of ATO military operation, from 2014 to 2019. We used 70,000 tons of ammo. And in those warehouses, 200,000 were blown up. This is definitely Putin's special services. All those people who were part of that operation should be given the Hero of Russia orders. They've been prepping us as a tasty cake for themselves. And when Captain Arestovych was coming out and saying things, what are we doing, and pointing attention to this stuff, I had special services inviting me on the carpet and telling me that I'm a provocateur and I'm causing trouble, a troublemaker. This is the level of work. All that cultural and military and special influence from Russia. What were they doing? They were legitimizing Russian storyline. This is all the system of influence that was here, that was active. It was a brilliant operation by our opponent. I've seen that, and not only me, my comrades seen that too, and we were not listened to much. So that was one of the signs that the operation was really a success. The crisis, true crisis, is not the inability to solve the problem. It is more of a not letting people to come to power who can solve the problem. They also purchased out a lot of strategic companies that we had. Banking system, Kharkov agreements that we signed. FSB was allowed to Crimea. Yanukovych signed paperwork to let them be there. So this is a whole long story that led us to a total crash. And it did lead us to that, to the loss of Donbass and to the loss of Crimea. I'm actually surprised that we lost that little. And only probably because our major archetype being the Civil War hero Makhno, and our speed and self-organization gave a very positive outcome in this case. What would be the worst Russian agents in Ukrainian special services? We had a general Shaitanov who was captured by SBU itself. He was a general of SBU, and he was also a commander of our special forces Alpha. Shaitanov was his last name. And he, softly speaking, knew a lot. He not only knew, he actually influenced a lot. Just knowledge doesn't give you much, but capability to influence things does. That's the general of Russian special service. essentially. The funniest thing for me was that his contact in Russia was colonel. That's disrespect to the general, but he still went for it. He agreed. I don't know if he had any decency. He should have asked for a general to be his counterpart in Russia, but he still agreed to. And there are more. You'll hear more interesting names in the near future, I think. I will not be disclosing them here, but there is more in the work. All right, recently you heard the assistant of SBU in Kherson region, who basically gave part of the territory without fight. Kulinichev, the head of the Crimean SBU, who also was arrested, and he is suspected of giving up the plans and aiding Russia. So it looks like those talks about capture of Kiev in 3 days, they actually had a lot of base on the ground for such planning. Absolutely. And not just agents, but also the agents of influence who were not taking right decisions or were influencing taking wrong decisions. I can say that even back in 14, 21 senior officer in SBU were arrested as Russian agents, generals and colonels. Alexey, I think we need to continue this awesome conversation a bit later. Right now, we're kind of getting into the time frame. Again, please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Alexey's channel, and I suggest perhaps next time. I was sincerely planning to wrap it in 40 minutes, but then we started talking about some pretty amazing aspects, and I did not feel like breaking it. Let's come back to this conversation. This is exactly what I was asking you about a month ago, when Putin conceived the idea to attack Ukraine. Let's reformulate that. Not attack, but annex Ukraine, and what he was doing for it. And that would be a subject for the next cast. I think his last decision was made in July of 2005, and not after meeting with Zelensky. Well, that was the final decision about military operation after Medvedchuk's arrest, and he spent a whole year preparing for it. But decision to annex Ukraine in general was July of 2005. After Maidan, that happened. I did travel to Moscow for a certain reason, right? People like to remember that I was taking pictures with Dugin. Exactly. I did take pictures and I did converse with him. So that's where you learn about the plans of your enemy. So will you tell us about these plans next week? Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we wave you goodbye on this, and Alexey will continue on Fagin's channel today, and we'll meet with him in a week on my channel. Tomorrow I have Oleg Zhdanov, a military expert, and big thanks to you, Alexey. Thank you. Till next time, Julia.